the Eshel tree. Abraham planted one of these trees in Beersheba, as it says in Parashat Vayera, Vayita Eshel beBeersheba, Vayikra Sham b'Shem Adonai El Olam. And ever since then, the Eshel has become a symbol of Abraham Abinu. We even refer to Abraham as Notea Ashalav, the one who plants his Eshel trees, in a prayer that we say, the prayer for rain on Shemini Aseret. So what's so special about the Eshel tree? Why did Abraham plant one? Why is it a symbol of Abraham? In order to get some answers, I decided to go out and learn a little bit more about this Eshel tree. So if you study the Eshel tree, one of the first things you'll learn is that it's no coincidence Abraham planted one in Beersheba, because this tree is well acclimated to the desert, to the harsh conditions. Even with very little rainfall, it sends its roots deep down into the ground and very far to the sides in search of water. And in this way, it's similar to Abraham, who also thrived in the desert. He spent much of his life in the desert, but also, spiritually speaking, he was in a desert, alone in his beliefs, in the land of Canaan. The next thing about the Eshel is that it can handle water that has a very high salt content. It absorbs moisture from the ground, which can have salt in it, and in the hot daytime, the branches, see, these little things look like leaves, but it's actually very small branches, and they secrete the salty water from inside the tree. And then the heat, that water evaporates, leaving the environment of the tree cool. So the shade of the Eshel feels much cooler than the hot area around it in the desert. This cooling mechanism is, of course, similar to the human body, which sweats, and then the sweat evaporates, leaving back like the salty, sticky feeling on the body, but leaving us feeling much cooler. And this also reminds us of Abraham, this shade that the Eshel gives, because one of the hallmarks of Abraham was Hachnasat Orchaim. He plants an Eshel so people traveling in the hot desert can take a cool rest under the shade. Of course, our rabbis take this a step further and say Eshel is Rashi Tevot, Aleph Shin Lamed, stands for Achila, Shatia, and Lina. Sort of a hotel that Abraham made for people to eat, drink, and rest for the night. And then afterwards, Vayikra Sham b'Shem Adonai El Olam, he teaches them to give thanks to HaKadosh Baruch Hu for the goodness that he has bestowed on them. So the last thing about the Eshel tree is, as I mentioned, the salt that accumulates on the branches. If you lick it, right away you can taste it, very salty. And the salt accumulates and also will eventually fall into the ground. And so the area around the Eshel tree is very salty, the ground, and it's known in Hebrew as a ma'agal seriba, a circle of scorched earth, where no other plants can grow because it's too salty. And this is actually to the Eshel's advantage because it's eliminating competition over the scarce resources of water in the desert. And this characteristic, one could say, is sort of the Eshel being very protective of its environment. And this is also a symbol of Abraham. How so? We see in Hayei Sarah that Abraham warns his servant that he cannot take a wife for Yitzhak from the daughters of Canaan, because Abraham has learned that they can't be trusted, and he doesn't allow them to get close to Yitzhak. Only from his own family can Yitzhak marry. And the timing of when Abraham plants the Eshel, when he comes to this realization that he can't trust the people around him, is right after the story with Abimelech and the servants of Abimelech who stole the wells that Abraham dug. And that's, I guess, the last straw for Abraham. He realizes he can't trust anyone in the land of Canaan. And it's interesting that, earlier on, it was Sarah who embodied that. She was protective of Yitzhak. She wanted to send away Ishmael and Hagar, and Abraham didn't find favor in his eyes. But eventually, after she dies and after he learns his lesson of Abimelech, he internalizes that lesson, and that's how he moves things forward with Yitzhak, very protective like the Eshel. So we saw how this Eshel tree can teach us 3 different traits of Avraham Avinu: his ability to thrive in a spiritual desert, his hospitality for guests, and of course his protectiveness for his son Yitzhak. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great day. Now we've seen how the Eshel can teach us about the character traits of Avraham Avinu, but now I want to look back in the Tanakh and find a different character who will teach us a little bit more about the dangers of these character traits, particularly the last one, the protectiveness of the Eshel, the scorched earth, the mistrust of people around it. And that character is going to be Shaul HaMelech, because the Eshel appears 3 places in Tanakh. First was Avraham Avinu, the other 2 are in Sefer Shemuel, dealing with Shaul. And we see Shaul is sitting under an Eshel tree on a hill in Ramah. Now, Ramah is not in the middle of a desert, so the Eshel is sort of out of place here. its natural habitat is the desert. While it can thrive in other places as well, this is perhaps a hint that Shaul's attitude is misplaced. Whereas Abraham, he planted the Eshel. He did it deliberately. He was in control of this notion that he had to protect his son and trust people. He did it in a very sensible, reasonable fashion, whereas Shaul seems to be under the control of the Eshel. He's sitting under the Eshel tree. It's controlling him, not the other way around. And of course, V'hanito biyado, his spear is in his hand, as he's yelling at all of his servants around him, accusing them of being in some conspiracy with Ben Yishai, with David. Because nobody told him that David had made a covenant with his son Yonatan, and he assumed that everyone knows, and he assumes that everyone's in on it, and he doesn't know who he can trust, and he thinks that everyone has been bribed by David, and we know that this has gone too far for him, because the next thing he does is a tragedy. The very next story is he finds out that David was sheltered in Nob, Ir HaKohanim, and then he goes to Nob and slaughters everyone there, a massacre. Now the final place where we see the Eshel is when Shaul is buried under an Eshel. Now the story of the burial of Shaul is actually repeated in two places. Once in Sefer Shmuel, once in Divrei Yamim. And what happened basically is Shaul, he dies in the battle with Philistine at Har Gilboa. They dismember and disgrace his body, but the people of Yabesh Gilad had a debt of gratitude to Shaul for saving them earlier on, so they retrieve his body under great danger and give him a proper burial under an Eshel tree. That's what it says in Sefer Shmuel. He was buried under the Eshel. And so that is very interesting. But in Divrei Yamim, it says he was buried under an Elah tree. Now there's a contradiction here. And when we have a contradiction between Nibi'im, that's Sefer Shmuel, and Ketuvim, Sefer Divrei Yamim, I think that what's going on is the simple meaning, what actually happened, is in the Ketuvim. And the Elah makes more sense in context because, again, Yabesh Gilad was not a desert. It makes more sense that an Elah tree, which is popular all over Israel, would be there. But the Pasuk in Nevi'im that says he was buried under an Eshel is teaching us the deeper meaning of what happened. It's the essence of the Eshel which Shaul is buried under. That symbolizes his downfall. That symbolizes his enduring legacy, which is tainted, and the good things that he did were overshadowed by this Eshel character trait, this mistrust, this protectiveness, and that's the danger, perhaps, of the Eshel. The lesson I think we can learn from the Eshel tree and Abraham Abinu, Shaul HaMelech, is that there are many different kinds of environments that Jews have lived in and can live in. And the two extremes are the hostile desert, and the other side we have the hospitable, friendly environment where we're surrounded by each other, environment we built for ourselves. And we have to build our approach to those surrounding us in accordance. If we live in a hostile desert, we need to be tough and protective. But otherwise, we need to trust one another, work together. And of course, our goal should be to build more friendly, hospitable environments where we can trust one another and thrive together. So thanks so much for watching. Have a great day.